Okay, let's talk about the fourth one, which I said when we started was the most important. So I want to make sure we spend a little time here and then we'll hop over to questions. And the questions can be about all of this or anything else that you want to talk about in terms of independent consulting and growing a consulting business. The reason why this fourth piece about doubling yourself is so important is that your results are a direct reflection of the way you're thinking about yourself and therefore what you're willing to offer as a consultant, what strategies you're willing to test out as a consultant, how you're willing to think about yourself in relation to the buyers of your consulting services. Let me give you some tangible examples here. The first is when you're in this first phase, usually 0 to 200, you may be in the spot where you're in that dependent mode on that maturity curve. You might be thinking of yourself as a contractor or an extra pair of hands or a fractional, who's taking a portion of a full-time job, of what could be a full-time job, when the company grows, for example. I so often hear people, and believe me, comes from people with PhDs, people who've been at McKinsey, people who've been at top level, piece spots in very well known companies. All spectrums of us as independent consultants, where they tell me I'm just a whatever, fill in the blank, because of the way we're thinking about ourselves. It's so easy to fall into this trap because we leave corporate where you might have had a title and an office and all the things and that corporate brand behind you. And all of a sudden now you're out on your own. You don't have the corporate brand behind you. You don't have a title anymore other than the one you gave yourself. And it can be really common to go down into this spot where you're thinking of yourself as sort of starting over or new at something or not good at something like business development. Of course, when you're thinking of yourself in that way, whether you realize it or not, subconsciously or consciously, then your results are a reflection of that. When you think of yourself as I'm bad at business development, of course, you're going to rely only on word of mouth and referrals because you don't think you're capable of going out and landing business more proactively. It's not a problem at all. You just want to know where you're at so then you can start moving forward. And it's possible to move forward. You don't need any more certifications or a certain number of contracts under your belt to start feeling and thinking of yourself a different way. In fact, you want to start thinking and feeling about yourself in a different way in order to create those results. So for example, you might start thinking about the ladder from where you might be now to the next stop might be to think of yourself instead of a contractor as a consultant, instead of just a whatever as an advisor or an expert, and that you're now developing the skill of you're a business owner and you're developing a skill of business development. Doesn't mean you have to go from I'm bad at it or I hate selling to I love it or I'm great at it. We can create these ladders to help generate the results that we're looking for, doubling. And then finally, thinking of yourself as a business owner, as an expert, as a thought leader, as someone who is good at it. As a business owner, you will be, if you're not already, good at business development, thinking of yourself as someone who's good at business development. I will tell you, and this is in the book, I went from being called directly by the CEO of the startup that I was one of the executives at. He called me sales repellent. Which was partially true because we would go out on these sales calls and I would be with the sales rep and he would be, saying all the things that some were accurate, some were less than accurate. And then I would be the one who wanted to make sure the client really understood what it meant in practice. And so, and sometimes redirecting the salesperson when it was blatantly not true. And so the CEO would call me sales repellent. And so I kind of took on that label that I was, when you think about these labels, it was way back over here, maybe even worse than bad at business development. Being a sales repellent is not good when you're starting your own business. So I share that with you because at this point, I've worked really hard on building my own mindset around sales and marketing, and my own skill set around sales and marketing, and being willing to test and fail and experiment and figure out what works and what doesn't work, and get to the place where now I feel like I'm really good at sales and marketing. Um, so this is possible for you too, even if no one ever called you a sales repellent, and you're just thinking you're bad at business development, from your own self-reflection. It doesn't have to be that way. You want to be thinking about, how am I good at business development, and finding those little pieces of evidence so that then you can build upon it to continue to increase your confidence. And finally, thinking about yourself as someone who belongs in the room with a CEO, who's someone who belongs in the room and at the table equally with your buyer. You're not someone, even if you left corporate in the org chart below that person, now you are an equal, an advisor to the people who are buying your services. And thinking of it yourself in that way is one of the key components to you doubling your revenue. Okay, let's talk about this upper limit. This is a book, you may have heard of it, by Gay Hendricks. I highly recommend it. Now I forgot the name, but I'll remember it here in a moment. Or if you know the name, you could put it in the chat. But he talks a lot about the upper limit. And we want to make sure that you're watching out for this upper limit as you think about doubling yourself and who you're being. Thinking about and noticing, it's so important to notice. I like to think about the thoughts that are going in my mind just as like the ticker in Times Square. What's going in my mind right now? Because that's what's driving the way that I'm behaving and the way that I'm showing up and what I'm not doing. If you're thinking about things like, if I earn more, it will be hard to sustain it, it's not worth it. Then likely you're less motivated to earn more. If I earn more, am I worth it? You're less motivated to earn more. Who am I to fill in the blank? Making more money will set me apart, or I'll outgrow. These are examples. You may have different ones, but really identifying your own upper limits in the way you're thinking about yourself and the results you deliver for your clients is imperative for you to be able to understand where your plateau is, where you're under earning, and where you're self-sabotaging, so that then you can redirect and rebuild that thinking into that next lane, like I was showing you on that last slide.